Hey everyone, Casey Barker here, and thank you for checking out my video on controlling your bass track. Now, I'm not going to go into too much content about tracking bass because, let's face it, tracking bass is very straightforward. Usually you're just going to plug in and get your levels right and go. And even on the high-end scale with high-end engineers, a lot of times we're not going in and tweaking and cutting and carving much EQ on the bass. It's just not necessary. Some of us will a little bit just because we know those frequencies and we know the instrument and how it'll mix well enough that we can make those decisions on the fly and commit to those decisions, but it's not essential. If I didn't need or have access to EQ to cut bass, I could always deal with it later, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Is for those of you who are songwriters and constant home content creators with your music, how do we take your recordings and control and tighten up the low end so that's going to play well in your track? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to jump over into my Pro Tools screen, and we're going to look at a track that I worked on a while ago. This came from my friend's studio. It's a great sounding track. It's a good sounding bass. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bypass all of my processing, and we're going to take a listen to how this bass track plays, just straight up how it was recorded. So let's take a listen here. Right, so it sounds okay, right? But what I'm hearing is, one, it's a little bit muddy, it's a little bit boomy, and it's kind of dark and dull and kind of unexciting. So I'm going to address those things right now. So when we listen to a modern mixed bass or a modern mixed track, you usually don't hear this boomy, woofy thing going on in the track. Engineers try to do their best to control those kind of frequencies and just make the bass sound really tight and clear. And so we're going to want to get rid of that, but we're not going to want to reduce so much or reduce frequencies in a way that we start losing notes when we start doing subtractive EQ adjustments. So let's dive into what I'm going to do with the EQ on here. Alright, so this looks pretty drastic, right? It's kind of, I'm boosting a lot of high end. Again, this is just to bring out the top end, bring out some clarity, and remove the perception of it being dull. But what I'm also doing is here, I'm taking kind of the boomy frequency with a wide bell, and I'm reducing it by about 4 or 5 dB, which is actually kind of a lot. I'm usually not trying to do that much EQ on the bass, but it's this one kind of needs it. So right now I'm in bypass. I'm going to take it out of bypass so we can listen to what it sounds like with the EQ actually in play. Alright, so now I'm gonna take this EQ node and I'm gonna push it up and move it around so you can see the frequencies that I'm actually trying to get rid of. And so I'm gonna amplify those so they're really accentuated so you can see what I'm doing, what I'm trying to get rid of. And usually these frequencies, the boomy frequencies of the bass, are usually living around 150 to 180. It's a little bit lower on this bass. It's actually sitting right around the 120, 130 range. So I'm going to find that, and I'm going to reduce that frequency at a wide bell. And the reason why is because you can see in the bass here, as the bass player plays around, plays up and down the neck, you'll notice that the fundamental frequency node within the graph starts moving. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to reduce at a narrow point so that's actually subtracting like a single note or the primary fundamental frequencies of that note. So we want to reduce at a wide bell so it's kind of bringing everything down together in uniform rather than just pulling away or subtracting too much of one frequency. Right, and that just kind of helps get that boomy frequency thing kind of under control. Alright, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my multi-band compressor. And this kind of does a bit of the same thing of what I'm already doing. It's able to subtract or do some subtractive gain reduction in really wide frequency ranges and really wide spurts. But it also does it like a compressor. So it only compresses or reduces once the threshold of each parameter has been met, right? So let's take this out of bypass. And again, you can kind of see that problem frequency, that problem range, that boomy frequency range is the one I'm hitting the hardest. And it's only reducing once the threshold of that parameter's been met. And that just helps, again, bring a wider range of frequencies down together uniformly so that I'm not losing notes. And then after that, we're doing a little bit of little compression, just trying to, bring the dynamics and just, reduce some of the dynamics, get the bass to kind of live in one spot and stay there in this track. This is a track that I can let the bass kind of live in a compressed state where it's not moving around much. I want it to hold. And so what I'm doing is about 4 decibels of gain reduction. I'll move my meter to an attenuation meter here. So on the hard hits, we're almost getting 4 decibels of compression. So what I'm doing to make up for that is I'm pushing about 4 decibels of makeup gain to kind of let even that out. And then generally speaking, one of the last things I'm doing is putting a limiter on my bass. The reason I like limiters is because it helps kind of offset what I'm doing with compression. Compression, when you think about compression, you're bringing levels down. That's what you're constantly doing with compression, is you're taking frequencies or you're taking level and you're bringing it down. Where limiters are kind of the opposite, especially limiters that kind of have like a maximizer type function to it, is now you're bringing the level back up. You're pushing the level back up. And you're pushing it back into the track. And so I'm going to do a little bit of limiting. So it's going to kind of reduce some of those peaks and just level out the entire thing. It's going to help bring out some of those frequencies back up, kind of push it up to the ceiling. And this is going to help me, again, furthermore, put the bass in place, where I want it. And that's how I'll use the ceiling knob in this instance. Alright, so let's A-B the entire signal chain now. So again, now it's pretty dark, it's thuddy, it's not really all that clear. Now we got some of our top back, and everything's leveled out a lot more. The low end still feels really good, but we just brightened it up. We've pulled out some of the mud. It's playing pretty well. Now I have my bass going through a reassign bus here, so I can do just a little bit of like final touch-up processing. So here you can see I've got a little bit more EQ, and with this one here, I'm adding a high pass filter so that I get rid of some of the extreme rumbly stuff that doesn't really translate into the bass feeling good. I'm doing a little bit more mud reduction and boosting a little bit more top to get a little more clarity, and then I'm doing furthermore a little bit more multiband compression, but in this case now I'm actually using the midband as an expander, which is basically the inverse of a compressor. So when the signal hits the threshold of that node, it's actually boosting EQ and boosting level of that band rather than reducing it. And that's helping even further push the brightness and the clarity of the bass out. So let's listen to that. And then I've got one final step of limiting. Alright, now let's listen to this in the track. now you can hear that the bass cuts through the track a lot better than it did before. You know, now there's some level difference, and level differences between when I A/B and when I bring my processing chain back in. That can be a little deceiving. But overall, what's there is you're hearing the muddiness and the boominess get pulled away, and that's going to just sit better in a track overall, especially once you flesh out and bring all the other elements back in. So awesome, there's my video on bass processing, controlling your low end, getting a nice tight bass sound that's going to play well in your tracks, going to play well with your drums. So hope this is helpful for you. Thanks again for watching. If you like the video, please subscribe, hit the like button, and we'll talk to you later.